It was certainly a day of ups and downs for Orioles infielders. Jackson Holliday's first home run is a grand slam as he comes back to the bigs, but the Orioles lose Jordan Westburg to a significant injury. I'll break it all down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, August 1st, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to recap the Orioles' 10-4 victory over the Blue Jays on Wednesday afternoon that clinched the series win over Toronto. The O's playing much better baseball, have won 4 of 5. We'll talk about Grayson Rodriguez's start. We'll talk about the bats heating up. And, of course, the big moment for Jackson Holliday in his return to the big leagues. Then we'll break down all the roster moves that the Orioles did make on Wednesday and could make on Thursday because they got to add more of these traded guys to the team. And then finally talk about the bad news at the end of Wednesday. Jordan Westburg is headed to the IL for a significant amount of time. What will the Orioles do in his absence? That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So let's start with an Orioles win. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Wednesday afternoon is the Baltimore Orioles 10 and the Toronto Blue Jays 4. The O's with this 4-game set take 3 out of 4, win the series against Toronto, have now won 4 of 5 overall. The Orioles 65-44 on the season. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of our old friend Austin Hayes, the Philadelphia Phillies forgot how to play baseball this week, and the Yankees went in and swept the Phillies in a 3-game series at Citizens Bank Park. So the Orioles lead is still just a half game over the Yankees heading into August. It's going to be a fun race down the stretch. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles win over the Jays on Wednesday. And the first thing you need to know is Jackson Holliday hit his first big league home run, and it was as big as it gets. A grand slam for Holliday. What a grand entrance. Now, we know how much Holliday struggled in his first stint in the big leagues. 2 for 34, 18 strikeouts, got sent back down. But with Connor Norby being traded in the Trevor Rogers deal on Tuesday, the Orioles had a hole at second base, and they recalled Holliday on Wednesday to fill that hole. And he got in the lineup, hitting 8th, playing second. And he rolled over to the right side in his first 2 at-bats. But then he came up, bases loaded, 1 out. The Orioles had a 4-3 lead, but were certainly looking to extend it. He gets down 0-2, and then he unloads a cement mixer slider in the middle of the plate. Holliday demolishes it onto Utah Street. I mean, you can't get much better than that for your first Oriole home run. A grand slam onto Utah Street, 109.2 miles per hour off the bat for Holliday, 439 feet it flew to open the game up, give the O's an 8-3 lead in the 5th. It was awesome. The swing was awesome. He knew it immediately off the bat. Every fan knew it. The bat toss was great. I mean, what a monkey off the bat of Jackson Holliday. And to do it in your first game back, showing the improvements he made after going down to AAA earlier in the season, just fantastic from Holliday. And then in his next at-bat in the 6th, he just missed an opposite field 3-run home run. And if you saw the homer, or the non-homer, it was a foul ball, a screamer down the line. It's right down the line and left where the wall is still not super far away. It's still 333 down the line. And he hit it right off the top of the padded wall, and then it ricocheted to the foul territory side of the pole. So initially, it was called foul because it ended up in the seats in the air on the foul side. But then the Orioles said, wait a second. And you looked at the review, and it almost looked like, because the yellow line, that is the foul line, runs up the wall and then meets the edge of the foul pole. And when that ball hit, it skipped right off the top of the wall. It's something I have never seen before at Oriole Park. It skipped off the top of that wall and then kind of directed to the left of the foul pole into foul territory and into the seats. But when they showed the replay and the ball hitting the top of the wall padding, it looked like it clipped that yellow line on the wall. Now, I don't even know what the rule would be on that because it did deflect into foul territory. So I don't know if that's a home run or a ground rule double. but it looked like it could have been a fair ball. And honestly, the Orioles challenge, they didn't really review it for that long and then said the call stands as a foul ball, and Holliday ended up striking out. But man, he almost had an unbelievable game. It was still a fantastic swing and just such a good sign for him. And the Orioles are going to need him. They're going to need him even more than they thought after Wednesday's game. And this is why. The second thing you need to know from Wednesday's outing is that Jordan Westburg left this game right before Holliday hit that grand slam. Westberg was hit in the right hand with a 95-mile-per-hour fastball from Eloy Rodriguez. He immediately was shaking it off. He went down to first base. I believe he stayed in the game to run. And then, of course, he scored on the Holliday homer, but then did not go back out there defensively in the next inning, left the game. We were worried because he left the game immediately. Now, shout out to Ramon Arias, who stepped in and got a hit and a walk. And Arias has been having a fantastic, or had, I guess I should say, now that it's over, a fantastic month of July. But we got the bad news after the game. Jordan Westburg has a fracture in his right hand. He is going to miss an indefinite amount of time. The Orioles are hoping he returns at some point late in the regular season. But this is an injury where you're looking at like at least 6 weeks and sometimes more for most guys. We'll get to that more later and what the Orioles do. But on a day that was a lot of highs, that was a crushing low to hear at the end of this game. And because of that, I mean, more pressure is going to be on Jackson Holliday. But if he can raise to the level like he did Wednesday, the O's might still be okay. Now, the third thing you need to know from the O's blowout win over the Blue Jays Wednesday is that Grayson Rodriguez did what he needed to do on the mound for the O's. Now, he was firing early in this game, completely dominated the first 2 innings, was kind of cruising along in this one. Then the Blue Jays, they got one in the third, one in the fourth, one in the fifth, and one in the sixth against him. So he started to give up a little bit of runs. But his final line, 6 innings, 4 runs, 3 earned on 6 hits, 8 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a home run on 96 pitches for Rodriguez. The unearned run was the one that came home in the 6th on a Gunnar Henderson error. That's another thing that's happening right now. He made 2 of them in this game, which was unfortunate at the times, and he's been struggling a little bit at shortstop, but the bat's heating up, so still feeling good about that. But Grayson, the fastball was just untouchable early in the game. He went to the slider some, the changeup some, but it was really a fastball day for him. 48 out of 96 pitches, right down the middle, 50%. The velocity was up a little bit on that pitch. He was maxing out at 99. Now, he was missing a little bit arm side when he was trying to throw them up and into lefties, and that hurt him a couple times, especially on I believe the ground rule double in the 4th. It was 0-2, and he just let it kind of sail over the plate and gave up that RBI double. And yeah, sometimes he throws a few too many strikes and guys jump on early fastballs and hit the ball hard, but the stuff is so good. He's attacking hitters more and more. I really liked what I saw from Grayson on Wednesday. He was able to get through those 6 innings, and once the O's got the grand slam, he kind of pitched to the score and just did a good job of lessening the load on the bullpen and having what ended up being, because it was only 3 earned runs, a quality start for Rodriguez. Fourth thing you need to know from this win for the O's is that it was just another very complete offensive performance for Baltimore. Every single starter in the O's lineup in this game reached base, which was obviously nice to see. You had, 7 of the 9 starters, 8 of the 9 reached base. Ryan O'Hearn had an RBI sac fly as well. 7 of the 9 starters had a hit in this game. Even Arias off the bench had a hit. I mean, you're getting a lot of contributions up and down the lineup once again. Colton Cowser, another fantastic day out of the leadoff spot for him. He had another home run, going 2 for 5 with 3 hard hit balls. Anthony Santander, a couple of hits. Gunnar Henderson had a triple, a couple of hits, and an RBI. I mean, the Orioles had 2 triples in this game. Ryan Mountcastle had a big 2-run triple earlier in the game. And, you have Cowser, who's loving the leadoff spot and ended up hitting over 300 in July. And you look up and down, and you're kind of loving what you're seeing from this order. I mean, Holliday only had the grand slam, but he had 3 hard hit balls. The Orioles draw 7 walks to only 6 strikeouts. They are walking a ton over the past week, which has been great to see. Also with the Westberg hit by pitch, 8 free passes to 6 strikeouts. Just another really complete day. I mean, Mullins walked 3 times out of those 7. Just a complete day by the Orioles offense once again. And, when you put up 10 runs on 12 hits, you're going to generally have that complete day. Fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 10-4 win over the Blue Jays that clinched the series, as they took 3 out of 4 from Toronto on Wednesday, is that, at least for right now, Craig Kimbrel is officially not the Orioles closer. Now, Kimbrel, after he had those back-to-back bad outings against Miami and San Diego on Thursday and Friday, he did pitch in game 2 of the doubleheader on Monday. Now, the Orioles were trailing 7-4 in the top of the ninth when Kimbrel came in, and you could say, okay, that's a super low leverage situation. They're trying to get him work. They're moving him out of the closer role. But when you looked at kind of where the bullpen was set up, where they were in the doubleheader, really, Kimbrel was by far the most rested and available pitcher to just throw that ninth inning, no matter what the score is. So I chalked it up a little bit to that, being, okay, it could just be he was the most available and they needed to throw him. But then when he pitched Wednesday, you knew, okay, he's in a little bit of a break from the closer role. Orioles leading 10-4 in the top of the eighth with the bottom of the Blue Jays order up, and that is when Kimbrel comes into the game. That is certainly not a save situation for the veteran right-hander. And this happened once before this year. Remember when he had those 2 back-to-back bad outings against the A's and got hurt a bit and wasn't looking great. The Orioles moved him out of the closer role and they used him in kind of a seventh inning role for a while there. And he was still pitching in fairly high leverage spots, just not in the ninth inning. And he pitched really well and he worked his way back into the ninth and then went on a fantastic stretch in the ninth inning. And Kimbrel handled that, I mean, about as well as a veteran future Hall of Famer could the last time. And hopefully he does so again, because it seems like the O's are going to try the exact same thing. He's still going to be a part of their inner circle bullpen, guys who Brandon Hyde will go to when they have the lead late in the game, but he's just not going to get the ninth inning for a little while. Now, Yennier Cano is going to get some chances. I would think Sir Anthony Dominguez gets some chances. Gregory Soto has a lot of saves experience. He was activated on Wednesday. He could get a shot as well. Maybe even CNL Perez. Jacob Webb has gotten some chances. They have some options they can throw in there. But hey, you know what? The command wasn't perfect, but he threw a scoreless inning with 2 strikeouts in the eighth. And again, bottom of the depleted Blue Jays lineup, 10-4 game, but at least it was a solid step and a 0 and a step in the right direction for Craig Kimbrel. And we'll continue to monitor kind of what his role turns into for the Orioles here. But Orioles win the game 10-4, win the series. And that was after they had made some roster moves on Wednesday, including, of course, the big one was getting Jackson Holliday up to the big leagues to do what he did with that grand slam in the 5th inning. But we'll break down all those roster moves they made Wednesday and talk about the ones they're getting ready to make on Thursday. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Liquid IV. When you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor, a surefire summer hit. You can get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. Because baseball and summer, they go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. Listen, sometimes, it's hard to stay hydrated, especially when it's this hot in a Baltimore summer. I mean, I'm out there playing volleyball on Wednesday nights. Like, you got to stay hydrated, and you can keep drinking water and you can keep drinking sports drinks. But you know what? Liquid IV is the place to go. Like, they've got these amazing flavors and they really do keep you hydrated. Here's how it works. You tear, you pour, you live more. 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. It's fantastic. So there's no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Supply House. You can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Do you need help with an order? You can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. So after the Orioles win on Wednesday, we're talking Orioles roster moves on Wednesday. And thank you for bearing with me again. The voice Still not 100% back, a little bit under the weather earlier this week. We're getting there. We're getting there, but we're powering through podcasts here. We got content to break out. We got the trade deadline. We got roster moves. We got Orioles winning games. We got to do podcasts here. So we'll make it through here. But O's made some roster moves. And of course, the first big one was Jackson Holliday promoted back to Major League Baseball. Terrin Vavra sent back down to AAA. Now, you may not have even noticed that Vavra was back in the big leagues when Connor Norby was traded on Tuesday. Orioles brought him up as just a bench emergency infielder for a day to give time to get Jackson Holliday to the big leagues. He was there for one day, and he is optioned right back down to AAA. We'll see if Vavra will come back. He is actually not going to be the replacement for Westberg. We'll talk about that. But Vavra, who missed like most of last year with a bad shoulder injury, had been pretty solid in AAA this year in 123 plate appearances, so he gets the shot. He's back on the 40-man, but could certainly be a DFA candidate if the Orioles need to clear some space there at any time soon. But we know how bad it was for Holliday last time, right? 2 for 34, 18 strikeouts, his first MLB stint, called up April 10th, went back down April 26th, and he started to hit a little bit in AAA, and then he went on the injured list in AAA in June 14th with an elbow issue. He returned 11 days later, but he only was a DH until July 19th. O's felt the elbow was good enough to hit but not throw because it was his throwing elbow. But then finally, July 19th, he returned back to second base. And since his return to AAA in general, has a 133 WRC plus in AAA. Since the return back from the injury, June 25th, a 143 WRC plus with the Norfolk Tides. Now, what is his role going to be? Now, before Jordan Westburg went down, I would have said, okay, he probably won't play against lefties, but with Mateo and Norby gone, he's going to be in there every single day against righties. But with Westberg on the injured list, I mean, Holliday may not still play every single day, but he's going to play against lefties. He's going to play most days because he's just the best infield option they have left besides Gunnar Henderson. And they're going to get his bat into the lineup, and he's going to kind of be forced to learn to hit lefties at the major league level, which is going to be interesting. But I love giving this guy, the top prospect, a real shot at being an everyday player right now. And that's kind of what we're going to expect here with Jackson Holliday back. Now, the other move that the Orioles made is they activated Gregory Soto, the hard-throwing left-handed reliever that they acquired in a trade with the Phillies, right before the deadline on Tuesday. He was activated to the roster, did not pitch in the game Wednesday, but I would expect him to get in there on Thursday in Cleveland. And the catcher, Blake Hunt, was optioned back to AAA to make room for Soto. Hunt came up on Tuesday, also kind of an emergency situation. Remember, James McCann got hit in the face on Monday, still caught, but had a crazy black eye. Apparently, he was not going to go on the IL because, he's got multiple nasal fractures, apparently. But he was also not going to be available for Tuesday, so the Orioles needed an emergency backup catcher just in case Adley got hurt, so they had to add Blake Hunt to the roster. Really, though, the guy that Soto is replacing is Cole Irvin, who was DFA'd on Tuesday to make room for Hunt. It was unfortunate, but Irvin was just pitching so poorly lately, so Soto takes his spot as a lefty in the bullpen, and hey, he might even get some high-leverage chances. He's got closing experience with the Tigers, was a high-leverage reliever for a time with the Phillies. So, and then James McCann, shout out to him. He said, I'm good to go. Starts the game, hits a double. Wearing the face mask on Wednesday. That guy's a trooper. That guy is an absolute trooper and seemed to catch a fine game back there, even though one of his eyes was half closed on Wednesday. So those are the roster moves that the Orioles made, but they still have some to make on Thursday because there were two other players they acquired via trade, and there's an injury to work with. Those two players are the outfielders Eloy Jimenez and Austin Slater. Now, they brought them both in, and it kind of seemed redundant to get them both at Tuesday's trade deadline, but they did. Eloy Jimenez was a former great hitter with the White Sox, but he's had so many injuries, having really a down year, but the stuff under the hood seems like he should be better than he is. And Austin Slater, also having a down year, but can play all three outfield positions, is a right-handed hitter who has hit lefties really well throughout his career, something the O's were looking for as well. I'm still not convinced they are actually going to activate both of them on Thursday. And this could be out of date by the time you listen to it because the O's are going to make the roster moves Thursday. They have to activate Jimenez and potentially Slater if they want to keep them. I'm convinced there's a chance that the Orioles acquired Slater a little bit earlier in the day on Tuesday, just in case they didn't get another outfielder. And then Elias found a way to get Eloy Jimenez. And when he got him, they realized Jimenez is an upgrade with the bat over Slater, but they had already gotten Slater just in case. And I'm convinced that there still could be a chance where Slater is just DFA'd here on Thursday because the O's just got a better option and he just never really makes it onto the active roster. And he's not a good enough player where that becomes like a real issue or anything. But there's also the chance that they're both added to the roster because the Orioles did acquire both of them. And I'll get deeper into the roster moves they actually make on Thursday, coming up on Friday's episode. But my guess is if they're going to put both of them on the roster, Christian Pache is going to be DFA'd. He came over in that trade with the Phillies on Friday. He's gotten into a couple games but hasn't started any games. He's more of a bench player, fifth outfielder, pinch runner, defensive replacement. And honestly, the other move, even with Westberg going to the IL, neither of these guys are infielders, so they don't solve that problem with Westberg going on the injured list. Heston Kjerstad is most likely going to be optioned to AAA on Thursday, and you just kind of have to prepare yourself for it. I mean, I believe he's 2 for 18 since coming back from the concussion after Clay Holmes hit him in the head with the fastball right before the All-Star break. Has been kind of struggling at the plate a little bit. He's definitely been struggling in the field. We've shown that he is especially if you put him out there in left field at Camden Yards, it's been kind of tough to watch at times, even in right field too. And being a left-handed bat, the O's need to get a little more right-handed in the outfield. Kjerstad isn't an amazing fit on the roster right now if he's not playing every day. And you can trust Slater more in the outfield. That's why they make this move. You can play Mullins more. You can play Cowser more. They're swinging the bat well. Now, as I mentioned, there's still a chance that just Jimenez is added to the roster and Slater is DFA'd. But I honestly will tell you, even if they do that, I think Kjerstad still gets optioned on Thursday because I think if you're adding Jimenez, he really can't play the outfield anymore. He's mostly a DH. So it's either Kjerstad or Pache. And if you choose Kjerstad, you really don't have like another guy on your bench who can even play the outfield at a solid level. But if you choose Pache, you have an elite defensive outfielder at all 3 positions who can bring you more stuff besides the bat. And I just think Jimenez would be taking at bats from Kjerstad anyway. I really do think prepare yourself for Kjerstad to be sent back to AAA. Right now with the O's making these moves, he just does not have a great fit on the roster at the moment. Now, what I would like to see, I don't really want to see Austin Slater. I don't care. I would keep Christian Pache over Slater. I would activate Jimenez. I would send Kjerstad to AAA for now and then kind of see how it goes with Jimenez and Pache and eventually down the line make that decision. I mean, Kjerstad would be back at some point this year, but just something to keep in mind as the O's get set to make these moves on Thursday. But of course, one more move needs to be made, and that is unfortunately putting Jordan Westburg on the injured list. He broke his right hand. He's going to be out for a while. What will the Orioles do, both in the short term and the long term, to replace Jordan Westburg? I'll try to break that down to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Now, I'd love to be in the ballpark when the Orioles return home in a couple of weeks here, and I'm checking Game Time for those tickets because you can get tickets at the last minute. They've got last-minute deals where you can save up to 60%. They got flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats. Like 30 minutes before the game, you can get a great deal. It gets sent to the app on your phone. You scan it and go into the ballpark. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the last thing to talk about today, unfortunately, is the injury to Jordan Westburg. I mentioned it earlier, hit with a 95-mile-per-hour fastball on the right hand, left the game, and then the Orioles said after the game he has a fracture in his right hand. He will be out indefinitely. Brandon Hyde said, basically, we hope to get him back before the end of the regular season. Now, best case scenario for some of these hand injuries is usually like 6 weeks, but it can be certainly more than that. And you get to more than 6 weeks, you're getting to the last week of the regular season. I think if you're the O's, you're just hoping you get Jordan Westburg back for the playoffs at this point. That should be your goal, to get him maybe in there for a game or two at the end of the regular season to get his feet wet and then have him back full go in the postseason. That seems like best case scenario to me. And that's unfortunate. We still don't know a timeline. In the coming days and weeks, we'll probably get a clearer timeline of when Westburg could be back. And it's killing him to not be out there and to have broken his hand. And I mean, he's been great this year, right? I mean, made the All-Star team, 129 WRC plus. He's hitting 271. He's playing great defense. He's got 18 home runs. He's been fantastic for this team. but it needs to be next man up. And that's what it's been all year for the Orioles. They've had all these pitching injuries. Jorge Mateo just went down. Jordan Westburg is going to be one of the toughest ones to replace because of how much he has meant to this team. So the question is, okay, what do you do next? Well, Norby's gone. Mateo's on the IL, so those guys not options right now. And Jackson Holliday and Ramon Arias currently on the roster. Now, the first thing is with Westberg out, Jackson Holliday, it's not just going to be against righties. He's going to be playing second base pretty much every day with, of course, Gunnar Henderson at shortstop for the Orioles right now. And that's going to be fun to see. He might struggle against some major league lefties. There's going to be some growing pains there, but I think he's going to be in there almost every day. So the other option is Arias, and then you do have to get an infielder up here. I mentioned it in passing when I talked about the other roster moves the O's have to make. It would be convenient, at least a little bit, if it was an outfielder that had gotten injured or if the O's had brought in another infielder via trade, because then that person could just replace Westberg and all would be fine. But Eloy Jimenez and Austin Slater can't play the infield, and you need another infielder. You cannot go with three infielders. You need somebody who can play the infield on the bench at all times. So they're going to make a move, and that move has already been reported. Andy Koska of the Baltimore Banner had it first. Livan Soto is going to be the guy who is joining the Orioles in Cleveland and will presumably be activated to the roster with Westberg being placed on the injured list on Thursday. So who is Livan Soto and what can he do for the Orioles? Well, we've talked about Soto a couple of times on this podcast before. He is a 24-year-old infielder, bats lefty, who has played in the majors briefly in each of the last 3 seasons with the Angels and the Reds. Came up with the Angels in 2022, and honestly, in 59 plate appearances, hit the ball really well. He hit 400 with a 181 WRC plus. Didn't really last, though. Played in only 4 games in 23 and appeared in 1 game with the Cincinnati Reds in the big leagues this year. And then Soto came back to the Orioles along with Austin Slater in that minor trade with the Reds for cash considerations or a player being named later right before Tuesday's deadline. O's kind of lucky they got Soto, got him on the 40-man roster, and made it easy to bring him up. So the question is, okay, why Livan Soto? Why not Terrin Vavra, who was just here? Why not Nick Maton, who's had a little short stint earlier in the season up in the big leagues in the infield? And of course, another question, why not Kobe Mayo? So let me get to all of those answers right now. Why not Terrin Vavra? He can really only play second base and maybe some corner outfield. The O's have tried him at third. I don't think they want him over there. And with Westberg out, they're going to need somebody who's at least going to be able to play some third base. And here's the other thing. Remember, when Gunnar got the day off the other day, Westberg was the one who started at shortstop. The O's are going to want somebody as the backup shortstop. Right now, it is Holliday, so that does help. And Arias has played shortstop at the major league level too, but it is nice to have someone else who also has that shortstop experience. And similar thing kind of goes right there with Terrin Vavra. I don't think he kind of gives them what they want. I mean, Soto is a somewhat similar player. And same with Nick Maton. He's not a great shortstop, and also Maton not on the 40-man roster. So you'd have to make another move to get him on the 40-man, and that would have been tougher to do for a part-time player like Maton would be. So for Soto, here's the thing. He has played all 3 infield positions and has done all 3 to a solid level in the major leagues. He played shortstop, second base, and third base with the Angels the last couple of seasons, and a good amount of innings. I mean, he has played 150 big league innings at shortstop. That has been his main position in the major leagues, and that is huge for the Orioles to have another guy who can play short. And this year in AAA, he's played a solid amount of shortstop. Really, I mean, almost 500 innings. Wow, I don't know why I said solid amount. That is way more than a solid amount. He's also played about 160 innings at third base. He's also played about 80 innings at second base. So he has a lot of time, and he's a solid defender at all 3 of those spots. And really, that is the reason they called up Soto. Now, he's had a okay offensive season in AAA with the Reds. 290 plate appearances, hit 283, has a 102 WRC plus, 13% strikeout rate, 13% walk rate to 18% strikeout rate is pretty good. Doesn't really hit for any power, more of a slap singles hitter, can kind of race things into a double with some solid speed as well. But I really do think Soto is the guy that's here because he can play defense at all 3 positions. Is he going to start much? I mean, maybe once a week to give the other guys some rest, but that's what's going to happen here. You're going to mostly see Jackson Holliday at second, Gunnar Henderson at short, Ramon Urias at third for at least the next couple of weeks, almost every night in the lineup. And then generally here and there, Soto will give Urias a day off, maybe give Jackson Holliday a day off. But Soto is also a lefty. So it's not like they're going to want to replace Holliday with him anytime against left-handers. They're just going to want to throw Holliday out there. So we'll see what happens. So that leaves me with the final question you're going to have. Okay, it's going to be Soto. He can, he's a good utility infielder to have because he can play all three positions. Why is it not Coby Mayo? And that is a great question. Number one is, and I've said this multiple times in this podcast, if the Orioles thought Coby Mayo could play a good defensive third base at the major leagues, I think he would already be here. That's number one. I think they're still worried about that, and they want to get the defense set because the O's have been in a little bit of a defensive slump, I would say, over the last couple of weeks. The other thing is, they may want to keep Coby Mayo's rookie eligibility. So then they can call him up next year and potentially get the draft pick if he wins Rookie of the Year. You would essentially have to keep him down until September to make that happen. So there's essentially one of two ways this can go, because obviously Coby Mayo can and probably would be a better hitter than Livan Soto, and most likely a better hitter than Ramon Urias once he got his feet wet a little bit at the big league level. He would struggle probably initially. Every Orioles hitting prospect pretty much has struggled for a bit when they've made their debut, and maybe the O's don't want to call up Mayo right when they're recalling Holliday and put pressure on two rookies immediately in the lineup. But there's one of two ways this can go. One is Soto is up here for a week or two. Urias and Holliday play every day. They kind of know that Mayo's coming up. They get him prepared. And in a week to 10 days, they call him up to give their a little buffer for Holliday to get going. And then they place Mayo at third base for most games. The other way they do this is they wait until basically September 1st, call up Mayo when you get the September call-ups. You get 2 extra roster spots, one for a hitter. You call up Mayo, and then he folds into that third base rotation until Jordan Westburg gets back. My heart says I would like to see Mayo in a week once they kind of get him fully ready to go, and let's see his bat, air it out in the major league lineup. My head says, especially because Holliday is back here now, I think they're going to wait until September. I think with the Westberg injury, this guarantees we are going to see Coby Mayo in Baltimore this season, but I still think they may wait until September. I might be proven wrong, but that is what I think the Orioles are going to do at this point. But we'll have plenty more coverage of these roster moves when they actually do happen on Thursday. We'll chat about them on Friday's episode. Get you ready for the rest of the weekend series between the Orioles and the Guardians. But that series starts tonight. Game 1 of 4 is a 6:40 starts in Cleveland. Ben Lively, who's having a sneaky good year, the veteran righty with a 3.44 ERA for the Guardians. And for the Orioles, the starter is TBD. However, there's certainly a chance it could be the Trevor Rogers debut for the Orioles, as he will be activated on Thursday. We'll see who they pitch, but I'll have the recap of the game, break down all the roster moves and more coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.